Welcome to Lowriders, another video. So this will be a little bit of a more of a heavy topic, but I'm not gonna make it long because I don't want to go into like a whole convoluted sense of it. But we're basically going to talk about like race, culture, and identity in your screenwriting. And what I mean is particularly yourself, your own culture, identity, and race in screenwriting. Because, there's a big thing over the last few years about like if you're not a particular culture, race, or whatever, should you be able to write about that particular thing? And for me, this is like an interesting topic because I'm Mexican, Hispanic, whatever you want to. I don't. Anyways, but the point is, when I first started screenwriting, everything I wrote was all the characters were Mexican, Mexican American, all of that. I was really big on like my culture, race, and my identity. But that all changed very quickly. And I'm just gonna give like a little bit of a story. I was very much like into that because I felt it was very important for like representation and like being like proud of like, my culture and all of that. And I still am very much so. But when my friend and I were making our first movie, back home where I grew up, they had a whole art like local art institute program type thing where they were going to fund art projects and particularly movies in film and cinema. That was like their film and cinema fund of locals who wanted to do film and cinema. And my friend is from Mexico. He's a DACA. He's a DACA recipient. And then I'm obviously Mexican American. I'm third generation. So we felt, oh, we have the best of both worlds to represent. And where we grew up is right on the border of Mexico and South Texas. We're the best of both worlds, like we have the person that's literally like an immigrant who's been here since he was like 2 or 3 and raised in the culture, but he has this conflicted, identity crisis where, if he goes to Mexico, they don't accept him as Mexican because he didn't grow up there. And on the state side, it's like he's DACA now, but he has this conflicted thing. And with me, it was sort of like the same thing. Like I had to sort of struggle with my identity as Mexican American. You know, at times like it's like you're too Mexican to be American, you're too American to be Mexican type thing. And so we had this idea for like this crime movie, and it was gonna really touch on like the characters kind of having sort of that identity. The film didn't really focus on that, but it kind of like touched on those things. But it was a crime movie, it was like a hitman going after hits and all this stuff. And we thought it was really cool. So Armando and I basically, we would like go to this film fund, and there was a couple others, and we like submitted our project and we did everything they asked, had the whole presentation down, and we just got like flat out rejected. And the rejection came down to like they didn't want to do movies that were like rated R, essentially. They wanted to do more like happy, like family friendly movies, and their whole thing was like, well, we don't want to give like a bad image of like our culture and identity. And for us, especially like myself and Armando, like where we went to school, they had like gangs. And, Armando grew up in a really rough neighborhood. And in my neighborhood, we had like actual drug dealers there. So for us, it's like, it wasn't so much like putting a bad image or anything, but it was like, no, this is like a reality of growing up in this. It wasn't that deep, so to speak. And basically like we got completely shut out. And like both of us took it very personal. And so at that point, we were just like, screw this. We'll just make it with whoever. Like at that point, before that, it was like all the actors had to be Mexican American, Hispanic, all of them. Because it doesn't hit, even a couple of the characters had very Hispanic names. But after that, like we realized in the business of making a movie, like you make the movie with the resources you have available. And I was in college in Lubbock, Texas, at Texas Tech, so I decided I'm going to make the movie here, and it's mostly white people there. And they were down, so we made a movie with white people. And at that point, I was just like, if I ever reach a point in my career to where it's like, people say something like, oh, you're not representing your culture and identity enough because you don't cast enough Mexicans or Hispanics or whatever. It's just sort of like, hey man, it's like at the end of the day, I'm trying to make a movie and I just want to use the people that are as passionate about it as me. And having the experience that I had and Armando had where our own people literally shut the door on us because like they just didn't like agree with our interpretation of like our culture and our identity. It kind of made me realize that you don't need to put too much pressure on that about yourself. Like, if whatever race or background, you may feel obligated to do that, but at the end of the day, you want to write the movies that you want to see. And whatever that entails, if you really do want to go and get heavy on the race and identity and the culture, like by all means do that. But don't feel just because you have a certain identity that it has to fall in line with that. You can write whatever you want. Just make sure that whatever topic or subject that you tackle, that you do it justice. There's the old saying that you get all the time with writing is only write what you know. And yes, that is true, but that isn't the complete saying. The saying is don't write anything until you know it well. That's really the true saying. So it's, if you want to write about anything, you got to do your research. You got to make sure you do it right. Nowadays, especially, even if you go in with the best intentions, somebody might get offended. Somebody might try to say that you are doing something offensive. But so you can't, if you worry about that too much, you're never going to write anything that you want to write about. You're never going to even really get started because you're going to be too concerned about offending this person or offending that person. Now, if you go in with the intent on offending somebody, then you totally deserve whatever backlash you get because that was your intention. But if you're going out there with honest and true intentions and you do the respectful research and you involve the people that know the subject very well, I say go ahead and do it. And again, going back to yourself, like don't ever feel obligated just because you come from a certain race or background that that's what you have to be singularly known as, that particular person. And honestly, I think that more often than not just puts you in a box. And I don't think it really allows you to really explore your identity because through writing, you're going to discover your identity more. I thought I knew what my identity was at 21 when I was writing my first movie. And at 35 now, I wouldn't say that identity was wrong, but it was a very, very underdeveloped. And there's things about my identity and how I feel about my culture that have changed drastically since then by allowing myself to kind of roam freely with that. So when it comes to your writing, I understand that that could be something very stressful, but don't let it like dictate you. You can like allow yourself to be free. So that's the end of that video. Pretty straightforward. I know that probably didn't give you too much like technique and skill about writing, but it is a topic that a lot of writers deal with. And it's something that I think a lot of them, it holds a lot of them back. So I'm telling you, it's okay. It's okay. Good night. Fucking terrible, dude. Terrible outs.